Since the beginning of literature, a certain kind of writer has tried to do exactly that. Satire was invented by Caius Lucilius in the 2nd century BC to lash the vices of his betters. From the outset, the satirist modelled his utterance on the voice of the man possessed by rage, my old friend, who I don't actually know, Bob Catter, making it harsh, spasmodic and spluttering, and they have described their own fictive state in terms of the current notions of the endocrinology of emotion. Juvenal tells us that his parched liver boils with indignation. The satirist uses both salt and gall, rubbing the salt of wit into the wounds on the body politic and spewing bile. As Dryden says, at the beginning of his translation of Juvenal, to view so lewd a town and to refrain, what hoops of iron could my spleen contain? None, bang! The satirist is not frothing and foaming as he writes. His hand must be steady as he takes aim. Anger transmuted becomes a style, a way of drawing, to be mimetically reenacted in the work of art. The caricaturist draws as if he was angry. His pen skates across the page. Everything is swift, bitten, burnt into the page. So the satirist writes as if he is suffering the physiologic effects of rage. You all know this famous quatrain from Donne imitating Horace. Kind pity chokes my spleen, brave scorn forbids those tears to flow that swell my eyelids. I must not laugh or weep since and be wise. Can railing then cure these worn maladies? When you read that, when you say it, you're aware that your tongue is strenuous. You have to move between these extraordinary positions in the mouth. Chokes my spleen, brave scorn forbids those tears to flow that swell my eyelids, if we're going to make it scan. But it's not meant to scan, it's meant to jerk all over the place. Occasionally you come across a satirist who is a victim of rage, who is so angry that he really cannot, well, at least he's miming a degree of anger that becomes inarticulate. There's a wonderful fragment in the actual handwriting of John Wilmot, 2nd Earl of Rochester, in Nottingham University Library, and it goes like this. Now, I need to tell you, I suppose, that Rochester was always in love with the court beauties. He was completely overcome by their glamour. And, of course, none of them would look at him. You know why? Because he didn't have any money. Because he was poor. He was dependent on the king's favour. I think he was also a premature ejaculator, but I don't actually know how many of them ever bothered to find that out. So here he writes in the person of someone seeing the woman he adores succumb to a man he hates. She yields, pale envy said, Amen, the first of women to the worst of men. Just so those frailer beings, angels, fell. There's no midway, it seems, twixt heaven and hell. Was it your end in making her to show things must be raised so high to fall so low, since her nor angels their own worth secures? Look to it, gods, the next turn must be yours. You, who in careless scorn laughed at the ways of humble love and called them rude essays. Could you submit to let this heavy thing, artless and witless, no way meriting, end? Can't go on. Becomes speechless with rage. In the satiric world, we have a specific form of writing a fragment in which the rage is meant to actually choke the writer so he can write no more. But it is, of course, an artifice. It's meant to be an obvious ruse. This is Swift on an Irish club. Ye paltry underlings of state, ye senators who love to prate, ye rascals of inferior note who for a dinner sell a vote, ye pack of pensionary peers whose fingers itch for poets' ears, ye bishops far removed from saints, why all this rage? Why these complaints? Why against printers all this noise, this summoning of blackguard boys? Why so sagacious in your guesses? He's talking about the people who are trying to persecute him for writing squibs about them. Why so sagacious in your guesses, your F's and T's and R's and S's? Take my advice. To make you safe, I know a shorter way by half. The point is plain. Remove the cause. Defend your liberties and laws. Be sometimes to your country true. Have once the public good in view. Bravely despise champagne at court and choose to dine at home with port. Let prelates by their good behaviour convince us they believe a saviour, nor sell what they so dearly bought, this country, now their own, for naught. Ne'er did a true satiric muse virtue or innocence abuse, and 'tis against poetic rules to rail at men by nature fools, but silence stops, stifled by his own bile. You know, when children have attacks of blind rage, you can't talk to them, you can't reason with them, you can't threaten them. The only thing you can do is try to hold them tight, try to stop them smashing themselves against things, try to persuade them that you love them and that their anger is a problem for both of you and doesn't mean that they're a naughty child. When a child has a tantrum, what's going on is the child is performing rage to get a result. The child knows that certain behaviours will produce certain responses. And that's a tactic. A tantrum is a tactic. And a tantrum doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your child at all. But that murderous, silent child who suddenly phases out and goes into a completely unreachable state, that child is in the grip of rage. And when it's over, the child may have no memory of what it did or what it said. It may be ashamed. It may recoil from itself. And everybody has to work hard to help the child overcome the rage, which we are told in abused children is the outcome of years and years of repeated trauma. Now, what I've argued in my little book is that I set out first the example of Bob Catter, a man whose rage I respect and whose pain is to me only too palpable. And he will tell you why. You can read it in Hansard. It is a Jeremiad and it's tragic. And I respect him. I don't belittle him or laugh at him. I don't call it a spray. I don't say that he spat the dummy because he's not carrying on. You know, it's not that Bob Catter missed the gravy train. It's not that he was left out of a sweet little deal. It's that he is watching the people he's worked all his life to represent destroying themselves because their lives have been destroyed. That's one generation. What if it's been happening for 20 generations? What do you do then? What do you do if you haven't got access to Parliament? Bob Catter was already out of order. He wasn't speaking to the issue. He was trying to land a punch on Melb, on Warren Truss. But of course, he wasn't supposed to be. He was supposed to be talking to the Drought and Equine Assistance Bill. And everyone just went, oh, here he goes again. And eventually he was told to sit down because his time had run out. But maybe he felt a bit better. Maybe some of the pain was eased. What my little book says is that for the rest of us, alcohol doesn't make us chop up the health centre with axes. Alcohol makes us sleepy or amorous or sick. We might be quarrelsome, we might be bad-tempered, but we're not actually demented and self-destructive and wildly violent. You can't blame the booze What's happening here is that the booze is unlocking something else, and this is the thing we have to deal with. I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know if we deserve to be able to do it. What I'm saying is we need a political structure in which rage can be formalized, in which it can be expounded, which we can be given a statement of grievance without humiliating people. The whole thing about the political framework is that you're not making people confess personal weakness. You're able to talk about issues as they affect the whole community. My reason for writing my little book was not, as some people have suggested, to make relations between black and white in this country even more difficult than they are. Why would I want to do such a thing? But like anybody who's seen what's happening, I do believe that Australians are good people. We learnt our egalitarianism from Aboriginal people, I reckon. We believe that everybody is worth the same, and we can't really stand back and watch what is happening in Aboriginal communities and just consign them to oblivion and forgetfulness. Nor can we just take away the women and children, remove them from the sphere of danger and leave the men to destroy themselves. This would be callous in the worst way. I reckon that men really need politics. They need corporate structures. It doesn't matter where you come across them, they will always have some version of that. And for me, the easiest way to go in there is to go with a treaty, to go with a draft treaty, so it can be talked about, man to man, if you like, equal person to equal person, where we have to make ourselves listen, instead of forever telling Aboriginal people what is in their best interest, to listen as they tell us. But remember that we have destroyed their languages. They have no way to speak to each other or to us at the level that we need to communicate. And we have educated them so badly that they don't have the English to do it either. And what is remarkable about the people who are now called Aboriginal leaders is that's the one thing they have, is the gift of the gab. They can talk to us, and they generally use words we like. If we go listen, if we sit on the ground, we're going to have to be patient. It won't come all at once. We might have to wait weeks before people begin to speak to us. And the words we hear we won't like. They won't be the words that make us feel good. They won't be words that congratulate us. We have to put ourselves, I think, through that discipline. The thing that makes me feel better today, I felt really terrible yesterday because I couldn't sleep. I kept having a long conversation with Marsha, whom I've known for years. I first met her when she worked on the Central Lands Council. She taught me most of what I know. And she was such a wonderful person to be with then, as an activist who was actually winning land claims for Aboriginal people, actually setting them up, actually setting up the arguments, presenting the material, the evidence to judges in chambers and so on. And she was wonderful. And will always be immensely in her debt. And there was I thinking, why would she think that I say these things because I'm racist? Or is she saying that I can't ever be anything but racist? And maybe I can't. I'm a gubba. I'm sorry. I grew up never knowing an Aboriginal person. I'd never seen an Aboriginal person until 1972. And I was born in 1939. That wasn't uncommon in those days. And then today it began to happen. Aboriginal people began to speak to me, and actually it began to happen yesterday. And they were saying, listen, we know what you're talking about. We recognise what you're saying. We think you're on the right track. Don't be disheartened. Keep saying it. People need to hear it. And it comes down to that same thing, that reconciliation is a bitter joke that nobody's laughing at. And if we don't deal with the rage that smoulders far, far down, then everything will fail. It doesn't matter how much money we throw at it, it doesn't matter what kind of rhetoric we hear, it's going to be very convenient, isn't it, riding roughshod over the permit conditions, riding roughshod into Aboriginal communities. And I was told today that there are new plans afoot to move whole communities in the Northern Territory because they want to mine uranium. Are we really going to do that again? Are we really going to do that again? Are we going to tell people they have to live in country that's not theirs? I remember the fights that were fought about uranium. I remember hearing an Aboriginal elder saying desperately in what was supposed to be a proper consultation, "Fuck off, fuck off, fuck off," because she didn't have the words, she didn't have the language, she wasn't a lawyer, she couldn't make a case. All she could say, and that little woman, I seem to recall, was actually thrown in prison because she had apparently spat on somebody or something. She couldn't have hurt a fly. Now we are going, well, she probably could, most Aboriginal women can. Are we going to go there again? This time with a whole new set of buzzwords, and with a whole new set of Aboriginal establishment leaders who will say that it's cool. And communities now have a new problem, which is we have people who can deal with Rio Tinto, who are the chosen spokespeople. Is it all going to happen again? It looks as if it is. Unless we resist, unless we say no, something different has to happen here. We have to start getting messages from the other side. But instead, what do I hear? I hear that there are 50,000 jobs for Aboriginal people in mining. What? That was the idea when the flag first went into the beach. Captain Cook thought these people would make a wonderful workforce. He was wrong. We actually, as it is, second-generation Australians won't work in the mining industry. We've got to import them from all over the place. We suddenly got this idea that, Aborigines would love those 50,000 jobs. And guess what? They can borrow money from the bank. They can have a mortgage and enter into debt slavery. They can be bound hand and foot to the 2-bedroom bloody brick veneer. Please, it's not going to happen. I'll tell you now, it's not going to happen. And the name of the game is resistance. And they have resisted us at such cost to themselves for so long that now we have to understand how the balance sheet really looks. I haven't deserved to have any Aboriginal man tell me where it hurts. And he wouldn't tell me. In writing my little essay, my 10,000 words, I took a huge risk. And I'm still nervous because it was presumptuous. I'm well aware of that, don't you worry. These are cultures that are built on reticence, where people don't spill their guts. That's a great Australian thing that we've all learnt, you know. You don't tell your name to a total stranger. Those people that ring up from Bangalore on the phone, what's your first instinct? Lie to them. Tell them bullshit. Go away. We don't have names or pack drill, and we should understand shyness and reticence in other people. We are a shy people. And we are going to have to be immensely patient, and we haven't been good at any of that. And we're also going to have to be humble, and we might have to be prepared to shed our tears, because it's time we shed them, and not for ourselves.